tragedy is not that we are so far from a better future, but that we are so close. There is a lot weighing against that possibility. We are already experiencing serious impacts from a destabilized climate. And a grimmer picture of where things are headed comes from the most rigorous scientific consensus building process ever undertaken, the United Nations Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. It's been more than 3 decades since the IPCC first sounded the alarm, but we are still a long way from doing what is needed to avoid further deterioration. So we're not exactly living up to the ideal of a rational, science-based civilization. Yet, over the last couple of years, powerful messengers like Greta Thunberg and larger and more frequent public demonstrations have shaken complacency, and incredible advances are happening. With pandemic recovery plans, we have a chance to supercharge that progress. Even more, this crisis can be a door to a different and more flourishing relationship between people and planet. The roots of my lifelong environmentalism lie in my favorite childhood hiding places. One was in Edward Scissorhands' perfect globe of a maple tree, whose leafy upper branches concealed and consoled a 9-year-old girl. I also spent hours in an old farm field at the end of my street and beside the creek that ran behind our suburban backyard. I didn't think in terms of a web of life back then. I just relished watching nature's parade of weird creatures. Then the field became housing and the creek got buried in a pipe. This story is a fractal of the big picture. We have already vastly eroded the real and unique wealth of this planet, its ecological wealth. Even without the sad stats on rates of species extinction, you don't need to look farther than your daily newsfeed for visceral images of devastation of Earth's remaining wild places. Even the best maple tree won't shield today's child from this level of loss. In fact, the climate and ecological crises are interlinked in so many ways that it makes sense to acknowledge a single ecoclimate crisis. It's true that the nature of this planet has always been and will continue to be challenging and sometimes terrifying for humans. Most kids first encounter the frightening face of Earth's creative power through the impressive diversity of bone-crunching dinosaurs that roamed the planet for over 150 million years. Granted, that was well before humans appeared, but Earth still regularly belches fire, whips up winds, conjures diseases, and smashes walls of water into places where people are just going about their business. So it isn't hard to see why Western civilization has been on a relentless quest to tame things down. But Earth is, of course, also miraculously rich and beautiful, and it is the only place in the vastness of time and space that we, Homo sapiens, could have evolved and can continue to thrive. Seeing the jewel-like beauty of Earth hanging in the blackness of space has transformed many astronauts. As Alexander Gerst said from the International Space Station in 2018, it is crystal clear from up here, there is no planet B. So, knowledge coming from many fields of science and technology affirms that our faith is integrally tied up with how we treat the natural world, an understanding that has long been core to most indigenous cultures. And the science of cosmology gives us the ultimate perspective on this relationship. From the Big Bang 13.7 billion years ago to a seared and pummeled new planet orbiting a minor star 4.5 billion years ago, to life exploding into psychedelic profusion, to us who can now piece this picture together. The human mind, well, mine anyway, can't really wrap itself around the time frame of our science-based origin story. But paradoxically, that's why it packs such a powerful sense of the miracle of this moment in time. So for me, it is a source of inspiration to engage in the immediate, urgent work needed to allow the story to keep unfolding favorably for the generations to come. Put simply, that work involves contributing however and whatever we can to the momentum that is already building. One face of the momentum building relates to personal action in our own lives and communities. I think Professor Jim Bendel's writing on deep adaptation points to a great question for engaging with this work. What do we need to relinquish and replace? And what should we restore and renew? On the relinquish and replace side, there's already a familiar A list. Less driving, more walking and cycling. Less meat, more plants. Tighter homes, lower thermostats. Less speeding around and more appreciating what's around. And just generally less stuff, more quality. Evidence of major shifts on these fronts remains thin, but there are many encouraging signs. One example is a recent Ipsos poll conducted in 12 very diverse countries. Almost 40% of respondents said they would replace some flights with train or bus trips, and 50% said they would avoid buying new goods. These kinds of choices matter much more than just their individual impact on carbon emissions. The momentum comes from the fact that they are part of the powerful process of social norming. We need to not just do it, but to be un-Canadian in letting others know. In Sweden, a significant drop in domestic flight travel in 2019 happened because both high-profile and ordinary individuals publicly committed to go flight-free. My daughter got a dash of flygskam, literally meaning flight shaming, ironically while attending a Fridays for Future rally in Stockholm. That deepened her own and hence her family's commitment to a low-carbon lifestyle. The other face of the momentum building is political. To deprivilege fossil fuels and bring existing and emerging solutions into play at the necessary scale, we need a serious price on carbon and serious investments in the systems, technologies, training, and other conditions for a low carbon economy. There is no single technological silver bullet, but we already have a large suite of viable ways to drive carbon emissions to zero. Knowledge of nature-based approaches to carbon capture and storage is also growing. This is one of many ways in which climate work fits with the longer-term vitality of the planet. There's perhaps never been more truth to the old Greek proverb, a civilization flourishes when people plant trees under whose shade they will not sit. We now have an unprecedented opportunity to make economy-shifting investments, given massive public spending to address the COVID-depressed economy. Many jurisdictions, including Canada, are putting forward ambitious green recovery plans, but spending to shore up polluting industries and stimulate consumption still dwarfs support for a green economic future. So we need to loudly and clearly let our governments know we expect climate-appropriate investments and policies. Rounding back to building momentum on personal action, I mentioned some relinquish and replace ideas, but what about restore and renew? One upside among the many miseries of the current pandemic is a renewed connection to place. We've had cleaner air, quieter streets, more neighborliness, and an uptick in walking, cycling, hiking, ski joring, look it up, ice fishing, and other outdoor activities. And while Amazon's been loading up porches with boxes, there's also been more interest in buying local. This is a great way not only to restore connection to place, but also to renew variety in materials, design, arts, and culture, and to increase resilience to supply chain disruptions. So after the long haul of this pandemic, the pull back to normal will be intense, but especially if we're among the lucky ones who have lived in relative ease during COVID, we can deliberately consider not just what we have missed, but what has made us feel more connected and grounded. A couple of years ago, I spoke at a hackathon where about 50 mostly young people were working to develop environmental apps. Wanting to have a bit of fun with how we relate to the environment, I played the songs of a few local birds, starting with what I assumed would be a giveaway, the American robin. After a squirmy silence, one voice tentatively put forward the name. So here's a challenge that may sound quaint in the context of a talk about climate change, but it's in keeping with the theme of renewing connection to place. Learn the songs of 5 common local bird species. You'll be gifted with a little pop of delight every time you step outdoors in spring. You might even turn your newfound awareness into science by participating in eBird, the world's largest citizen science project on biodiversity. The Cornell Lab of Ornithology takes observations submitted by hundreds of thousands of birders and, among many other things, maps the migratory paths of over 800 species. This illustrates a critical point, lest anyone think connection to place is boringly old-fashioned. Data mining, remote sensing, machine learning, and other incredible advances in our ability to understand the world around us have a huge role to play in bringing our economic systems into right relationship with the natural systems we are a part of. That's a way better use of this brilliance than the one that currently predominates, figuring out how to sell us more stuff. Zooming back out to the cosmology thing, for evolutionary theologian Michael Dowd, the fact that science gives us such knowledge of the history of the universe and of our own very recent emergence into the story calls us to be radically self-responsible. We can continue to accept that this is our role in the story and suffer the ongoing degradation of our own vitality along with that of the planet. Or we can embrace the responsibility and the potential of mutual vitality. So let's feed the momentum that will make this turning point. We are part of something big.